welcome for all of you who are watching. You're tuned into TMH, and this is our daily English news. Our headlines for today: Tigray government warns humanitarian crisis in Tigray will further deteriorate if no immediate cessation of hostilities is reached. EU calls on for an immediate halt to the joint Eritrean and Ethiopian offensive, and Ethiopia signals escalation in war with a plan to seize airports within the country. As we move on to our main updates, the government of Tigray warns that this humanitarian crisis in Tigray will further deteriorate if no immediate cessation of hostilities is in fact reached. The government of Tigray made the announcement in a statement it released on this cessation of hostilities. The government of Tigray called on the international community to take practical steps towards an immediate cessation of hostilities. We are ready to abide by immediate cessation of hostilities, as the statement added, calling on the international community to take practical steps to compel the Eritrean army to withdraw from Tigray and press the Ethiopian government to come to the negotiating table. The government of Tigray welcomes the statement by the chairperson of AU Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, and issued on the 15th of October, calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities and the resumption of humanitarian aid as well. The government of Tigray noted that the United Nations, African Union, and the United States, as well as the European included, along with others, all supported and endorsed its call for the immediate cessation of hostilities that was issued on the 11th of September. Yet no practical steps have been taken to make this a reality. It says efforts to bring about a cessation of hostilities underscore the gravity of the humanitarian catastrophe currently taking place in the northern region of Ethiopia. The statement disclosed that the indiscriminate aerial and artillery bombardments targeting civilians are destroying entire towns, villages, homes, and that the systematic massacres, rapes, and displacements and their starvations remain below the world's radar screen currently. Deliberately brutalizing civilians, as our enemies are doing, is not just a violation of international law, but an affront to humanity law as well, as the government of Tigray stated. The government of Tigray also said, overriding aim is thus to stop the massacres and the mass expulsions of Tigrayans in the areas under occupation by the Eritrean-led forces. Although now is the beginning of the harvest, active fighting is taking place in all areas of Tigray and that are expected to produce enough yield to feed millions of Tigrayans, consequently absent an immediate cessation of these hostilities. As the humanitarian crisis in Tigray continues, when the further deterioration will also continue. And according to the government of Tigray, the international community has a choice to make: either ensure an immediate cessation of hostilities or help the people of Tigray defend themselves against this ongoing genocidal onslaught. If neither path is followed and the people of Tigray continue to fight to ensure their survival, and they will never allow themselves to be ruled against their will, as they underlined in this statement. They also added that without peace in Tigray, there can never be peace in the entirety of Ethiopia. The UN Secretary General says the situation in Ethiopia is spiraling out of control. The UN chief, Antonio Guterres, said that hostilities in the Tigray region of Ethiopia must end now, and including the immediate withdrawal of the disengagement of Eritrean armed forces from within Ethiopia. Let's take a listen.
The situation in Ethiopia is spiraling out of control. Violence and destruction have reached alarming levels. The social fabric is being ripped apart. Hostilities in the Tigray region of Ethiopia must end now, including the immediate withdrawal and disengagement of Eritrean armed forces from Ethiopia. There is no military solution.
Guterres said civilians are the ones paying a horrific price. He also noted that the indiscriminate attacks, including residential areas, are killing more innocent people every day, damaging critical infrastructure and limiting access to vital services as well. He says we need the urgent resumption of talks towards an effective, lasting political settlement. And the UN Secretary General said that the international community must rally together now, finally, for peace to take place within Ethiopia. The EU calls for an immediate halt to the joint of Eritrean and Ethiopian offensives as well. The High Representative, in a declaration on behalf of the EU on the intense fighting in the northern region of Ethiopia, called for a full withdrawal of Eritrean troops from the sovereign territory of Ethiopia and the European Union repeated the use of drone attacks against populated areas is exposing civilians to heightened risks, and the EU deplored the dramatic escalation of violence and the irreparable cost to human life, including the confirmed death of humanitarian workers in Shura who deployed bring relief to a population that is currently in distress. The EU stated that it commends and supports the ongoing efforts of the EU-led mediation to finally convene in the coming days as the launch of negotiations between both parties to the conflict, and they added that they expect the conflict parties to honor their commitments and talk with much as begin without any delay moving forward. The European Foreign Affairs Council discusses the worsening humanitarian situation currently taking place in Tigray. Pekka Haavisto, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Finland, speaking before the start of the Foreign Affairs Council that took place on the 17th of October, yesterday, Monday, in Luxembourg, called the situation in Tigray a humanitarian catastrophe. Let's take a listen.
Secondly, the situation in Ethiopia is very, very concerning in the Tigray region, and it looks like a humanitarian disaster and humanitarian catastrophe.
While the entirety of the international community confesses their concern for what's taking place in the northern region of Ethiopia, Ethiopia continues to signal escalation and war with new plans to seize airports. The Ethiopian authorities also warned civilians and humanitarian groups alike to stay away from military assets controlled by Tigray forces. And according to a statement posted on the Government Communications Service's Twitter account on Monday, the government of Ethiopia called for civilians and humanitarian operators to distance themselves from what is claimed as TPLF's military assets. The statement alluded to repeating the grave violations of Ethiopia's airspace by hostile foreign actors, adding that it is imperative that the government of Ethiopia assumes immediate control of all airports and other federal facilities and installations within the region. In recent weeks, airstrikes and drones have hit civilian targets. Peace talks that were originally scheduled on the 8th of October are now held without any indefinite. Fighting has been particularly intense around Shura and northwestern Tigray, where the United Nations World Food Program confirmed on Saturday that an airstrike hit International Rescue Committee and workers distributing food. One staffer died along with 2 other civilians. The aid worker, who worked for the International Rescue Committee's health and nutrition team, died of injuries sustained while delivering assistance to women and children on Friday, and the IRC said in a statement that another IRC staff member was injured in the same attack while 2 other civilians were killed, 3 wounded. The government of Ethiopia said they deeply regret any harm that might have been inflicted upon civilians, including humanitarian personnel. The Ethiopian government made the announcement in a statement issued through communication services on Monday, and 3 days after reports of casualties and civilians, including humanitarian workers in Shura town of Tigray region. And the latest attack is one of the serious attacks on civilians through aerial bombardments, shellings in several towns and villages in Tigray by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, who have unleashed a joint offensive. The new Chancellor of Exchequer of the UK government says genocide is happening in Tigray. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, challenged the UK Foreign Office Secretary what she's doing to stop channeling international aid to the Ethiopian government until Abiy Ahmed stops this ongoing genocide. Let's take a listen.
There is a genocide happening in Tigray. What work is she doing with our partners in the United States, the EU and other Western countries to send a message to Prime Minister Abiy that there can be no international aid channeled through the Ethiopian government until the genocide stops? And why does he still have that Nobel Peace Prize? Is it not high time he was stripped of it?
Mr. Speaker, can I thank him for his praise? I'm not sure I'm doing that brilliantly. We are continuing to work really, really closely with our partners in the US, in the UN, and indeed I met the African P3 partners during my recent visits to New York and Washington. But really importantly, we're also supporting Obasanjo, Bankole, and President Kenyatta's efforts as well to try and bring all people to a ceasefire. Regarding a Nobel Peace Prize, that is a decision for the Nobel Committee themselves.
Researchers say that Ethiopian and Eritrean alliance against Tigray is one bent on not only defending an armed foe, but defeating all of the exterminating the social base on which it rests. Dan Connell, a research affiliate at Boston University's African Studies Center, made this remark at a panel discussion organized by the university under the theme, Eritrea's Role in the Tigray War, the What, the How, and Why. Let's take a listen.
To paint a gruesome picture of an alliance bent on not only defeating an armed foe, but of exterminating the social base on which it rests. It was the wanton sabotage of what was left behind as much as what was plundered that revealed the intent to destroy the underpinnings of the Tigray economy and strip its people of the ability to survive. The report concluded that the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea are starving the people of Tigray, and that the evidence suggests this was intentional, systematic, and widespread. There is a word for this that I do not use lightly: genocide.
Our final update for today in related news, USAID Chief Samantha Powers said that the staggering human cost of the war on Tigray should shock the world's conscience. Powers said the potential for further widespread atrocities in northern Ethiopia is extremely alarming. She added that the risk of additional atrocities and the loss of life is intensifying, particularly around Shura and the Tigray region. Powers said most recent indiscriminate attacks by the Ethiopian National Defense Forces alongside Eritrean Defense Forces in Shura and the reports that Eritrean forces may soon take control of civilian population centers are gravely concerning. To protect civilians, this offensive must stop immediately, as Powers stressed once again on her official Twitter account. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.